on the channel, we like to cover the world of cleaner, greener, safer, and smarter transportation. That normally means, electric vehicles, really low emission mass transit, and new ways of making the world a cleaner, greener, safer, and smarter place. But sometimes we also talk about energy products because without clean energy, we can't have clean transportation. And today, it's my honor to talk to Arch Rao, who is the CEO of Span. Now, if you don't know what Span is a company that has reinvented the electrical sub panel that most of you have sitting in your homes. It's taken out all of the dumb bits that make an electrical sub panel and made it smart, which if you're like me and you have a solar array sitting on the roof of your home, or perhaps you have a Tesla Powerwall, or you're on the waiting list for one of the new examples of electric vehicles that have vehicle to home capability, this gives you the ability to control exactly where the power goes in your home and gives you a real granular look at what's using energy in your home and gives you the ability to prioritize energy when the power goes out and you've got a small battery pack just keeping your home ticking over. Arch, thank you so much for joining me today. We had planned to meet at CES 2022, but of course, it was a bit of a letdown this year. CES 2022 was all but cancelled. We couldn't go because we didn't want the team to become sick. I know that your team, scaled things back. So CES 2022 was going to be the world debut of Span's second generation electrical home panel. Could you tell me a little bit about it?
Thanks, by the way, Nikki, for taking the time to chat with me. And I'm looking forward to sharing more about Span's vision and our products. Maybe perhaps a bit of background about Span and kind of the evolution of the products to get to Gen 2.0 that we have in the marketplace today. Like you rightly said, the home electrical panel is what connects to the solar in your home, the batteries, and now with the increased adoption of electric vehicles will be the device that connects with vehicles, not just for charging, but potentially for vehicle to home applications as well. And it's a piece of infrastructure that has seen little to no innovation in almost a century now. So what Span set out to do a few years ago was reinvent the home electrical panel to make it easier for customers to decarbonize through electrification. We've learned a lot over the last year and a half, 2 years of deploying our first generation product. And late last year, we introduced our Gen 2.0. It's a smaller, sleeker, more efficient, more computationally capable, less expensive version of our product that's designed to go into every type of single family home. And as we think about the continued effort towards electrification, movement towards electrification, we'll have newer generations of electrical panels that can go into every type of single family home, apartment buildings, and conceivably any type of home that people live in. We also introduced right before CES, and we were hoping to actually do a fairly big showcase of our EV charger called Span Drive, which I'm looking forward to sharing more with you about as well.
Span has done something that I think a lot of people had hoped for, but that nobody had actually managed to make a commercial product. Now, your first generation product is a little bit larger than the one you've just announced. That said, it has been transformative in the lives of people who have opted to install it. Because if there is, for example, a power cut that spans from late evening into night, or maybe happens overnight and goes into the workday, in the age of COVID, in the age of home working and physical distancing, we all need to keep our homes running while also being mindful of our energy use. So perhaps you can talk to me about the AI that helps you to manage your energy in a power cut. You've got a couple of Tesla Powerwalls or a vehicle to home system. Talk to me about how it actually works.
Absolutely. So the adoption of storage has obviously scaled fairly rapidly over the last half a decade, especially with the increased instance of power outages across different parts of the country, and the general notion of being able to self-consume. If you have a solar system, being able to store that energy being generated in your home and store it in your battery and then use it again when the cost of energy might be high. Both the economic use case and the emotional reason for getting backup for your home with storage has driven a fairly significant growth in adoption of batteries. But unfortunately, the battery backup experience for most homeowners today is rather poor. You can either opt to get only a small portion of your home, small number of circuits in your home backed up with a single battery, or you're forced to get multiple batteries that can be cost prohibitive to try to back up your entire home. And even in the scenario where you can afford to back up your home with 2 or 3 or 4 power walls, you still don't have any real-time visibility or controls. And that just seems like a letdown in the 21st century. So when we set out to build our first generation panel, the goal was very simple. There has to be a dynamic, configurable backup solution, which can become the best backup solution for homes, period. And that's really what we achieved with our panel. What we're able to allow customers to do with all the magic that happens in our panel and our hardware, but more importantly, through our consumer app, the Span Home app, is allow customers, homeowners, to see in real time exactly how much energy is in their battery, but not in some abstract percentage concept, but really in terms of how many hours and minutes of backup they have, see precisely what circuits are powered on, and then change the priorities of those circuits in real time. So you could say, based on the expected duration of the outage, I'd like to have my air conditioning system run versus not run my air conditioning system because the duration of the outage is likely to be fairly long, and I'd rather have essential circuits and appliances like my kitchen and refrigerator circuits being powered on. And that is really powerful in my opinion.
Someone who lives out in a rural area like I do, we are off-grid for everything apart from electricity. So we have a well, we have a septic system, and I know sometimes trying to get systems to work with that can be a real pain because the initial starting current of the well pump is huge and it knocks out a lot of traditional energy storage products. Being able to shuttle things around when you need that extra power is really useful. You have had a very interesting and diverse background. So you studied automotive engineering in Madras, then you studied mechanical engineering at Stanford, and now you're working in the energy sector. You used to work with Tesla, used to work at Tesla on their energy products. Tell me about your journey to today, to working as the CEO of Span.
Yeah, happy to. Like many things, in hindsight, they all seem magically well connected and very rational, right? I started off my academic journey by pursuing a degree in automotive engineering at a time when many folks were moving to the world of computer science and software, largely because I like building products. I like building tangible products, things that you can touch and feel. That then led me to a graduate degree, a PhD program at Stanford that was focused on engines and power conversion engines. Not that far away from the automotive world, but really delving into the depths of power conversion. So how does fuel become energy? How do we generate power at the grid scale? And realizing that it's fairly inefficient how we do it today, and that there's likely ways to make them more efficient. I'm embarrassed to say I spent about 4 years doing research at Stanford before realizing that incremental efficiency gains in engines is just not how we're going to, change the world. That's just not going to buck the curve enough. And this was in the mid 2000s when there was an increased understanding of the importance of technologies that can mitigate climate change. That then led me to drop out of the PhD program and join a good friend of mine, Joe Ben, in developing airborne wind turbines. So this was a very out there concept. So the notion was we need a massive amount of renewable energy being produced, and we need to do it at scale and inexpensively. And one of the very out there concepts was trying to extract power from high altitude winds. And so we built some aircrafts with turbines mounted on them on tethers. So think, very wild ideas, but from a professional experience standpoint, simply unmatchable. I got to go build a company and a team and learn how to build really complex engineering products. under the shadow of someone that had done it before. Then I realized that it was cool to build products, but I didn't quite understand how the electricity market works. So I spent about a year developing optimization algorithms for trading in the energy market. So as you know, at the end of the day, cool technologies only really see the light of day if there's an economic rationale for them to be deployed. So it was great. It was great to go do that for a while, but I found consulting and engineering optimization to not be as cool or sexy as actually building products. So I helped co-found a second company that was focused on metering and energy efficiency in the commercial industrial space. So this was in the early part of last decade when there were a lot of incentives being offered to buildings to identify where there were opportunities for energy improvements, everything from lighting to VFDs to HVAC systems to chillers. And there was a very data-centric approach that we took to this market. But it was an interesting learning experience in that there was not as strong a product market fit as we'd hoped there would be, but nonetheless, a lot of learning in terms of raising capital, building a team. So at this point, I'm talking about having tried to start and having failed at scaling, unicorn companies in the energy space. And then I chanced upon a meeting with JB, the then CTO and founder at Tesla. And as circumstance would have it, he was thinking about building an energy group within Tesla to solve this problem of intermittency with solar, which ultimately would enable more adoption of electric vehicles. And that was perhaps a fortuitous meeting that led to me joining them as one of the early leaders in the group, leading some of the engineering work, then subsequently the commercial work, and then leading all of energy products for Tesla, which range from the Tesla Powerwall all the way to grid scale products, and then some solar products like the solar roof as well. The culmination of all of this and seemingly meandering journey is that I had worked on renewable power generation, I'd worked on energy efficiency, I'd worked on energy markets, I'd worked on energy storage and distributed generation like solar, and I had been fortunate in seeing sort of all the different aspects of the energy landscape. And I kept coming back to what are perhaps the most important problems for us to solve to decarbonize this decade. And it kept bringing me back to the fact that consumers are going to be leading this effort. Like we have to enable consumers to make choices that are carbon free or carbon neutral. And it's going to have to be an infrastructure, a hardware solution. It can't just be one more software solve for an otherwise hardware rich environment, and hence SPAN.
It's wonderful to hear how people, migrate from one career to another. I know that myself. I trained as a classical musician. I was a professional oboist for 10 years before I became an automotive journalist and I suppose a Greek and car journalist. So I love hearing other people's stories because it really helps you understand their journey and why they are doing what they're doing. And I think purpose is so important. Understanding the purpose behind the action is so important. Let's talk about the potential for SPAN, and both in terms of its energy controlling capabilities, but also in terms of smart grid connectivity. Of course, one of the benefits to a very smart connected distribution panel in the home is that it can tell you a whole lot more about what's going on in your home than a dumb unit. Now, I'm a real home automation nerd. I've got Home Assistant running on my home. If you've watched this channel, you'll know we did a tutorial a while ago on how to get your Chevrolet Bolt to turn itself on if the temperature outside was below a certain point and it was a cold day. And we automate that. Everything in the house is automated. When you have smart home appliances, they can sometimes tell you how much energy they're using. So I know how much energy my TV, my washing machine, my dryer uses. But there are certain things that you may use in the home that you don't know how much energy they use. And it could surprise you, especially if you've got children and your children are going playing games and they're leaving the games console on or the TV on, going and doing something else. It can lead to your electricity bill being really huge. Now, SPAN does something very clever. It can identify what it is that you're using without you having to have it plugged into a separate circuit. So let's talk a little bit about that and what the benefits are to the home users.
Yeah, I think the big sort of epiphany, if you will, was realizing that the home electrical panel is unique in two regards. One, it's ubiquitous. There isn't a single home or building in the world that doesn't have or need an electrical panel or an electrical distribution panel. The second, that it's persistent. By design, once installed, it's typically in your home or that building for decades, right? That's very unlike most pluggable devices, be it human machine interfaces like your HomeKit or your Alexa, or sort of retrofit metering devices that you might have for different appliances. So that then gave rise to the notion that if it's such a central part of the infrastructure and it naturally connects to power from the grid, naturally connects to your solar, your batteries, your EVs, and all of your appliances in your home, perhaps that is the natural control center for data as well in your home, for energy-related data at the very least. And that was sort of the journey progression, if you will, for us to go from, let's make a device that can do power management of, say, storage and give you the best backup experience, to saying, let's make it really an edge compute device that has enough computational horsepower to do very elegant things like not just identifying and monitoring what might be consuming power, or like in your case, your children's game console in the middle of the night, if you will, that's been left on, all the way to actually being able to control things when things might be performing anomalously. Let me give you an example of that. In my own home, we had a situation where our water heater had a pump failure, and the pump failure led to it trying to pull in more water and try to heat up the water, and consequently just flooding our garage, right? It wasn't so much the failure of the pump that was the catastrophic event. It was the fact that it flooded our garage in our basement, and we had to go get insurance help, and it took months to fix and rectify. And that inconvenience is actually quite a lot and quite expensive for any homeowner, right? What we're increasingly able to do, because of the fact that we measure every single electron flowing into each circuit in a panel, is identify these anomalies before they happen and potentially take preventative action like controlling or turning off that pump before something more catastrophic happens as well. And I think that's the promise of what we're trying to do, where monitoring without controls is not valuable, and then the controls without embedded intelligence is not scalable. We have to get to a place where we're not only taking action on your behalf, but we're also doing so because we can do more than just tell you how much energy you might be consuming.
And I assume that applies for things like if the dryer just continues to run and there's a potential for it starting a fire, or you leave the stove on, or you leave the oven on, those things can be easily identified because your system knows my oven is unlikely to be on for 6 hours.
Yeah, this is another, like outside all the hardware innovation that we're doing, I think we're investing a lot into the software piece. And one of the things that we had announced late last year, and we're again hoping to showcase a bit more earlier this month at CES, was what we're internally calling the check engine light project, right? You've got this ominous light that goes off in your car that gives you at least some indication of the fact that something could be off with the car. You don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but it prompts you to take action, right? We want to be that check engine light for everything in your home. And I think we have just the right tools, both in terms of the physical presence and the sensing, but also in terms of all the algorithms that run on device and in the cloud, and of course the controls that are embedded within the panel as well.
I know that utility companies are becoming increasingly interested in smart home appliances because it gives them an idea of what demand periods look like. Does SPAN offer the option for utility companies for customers who opt in for example, take control of the air conditioning circuit, so that if it's going to be a really high demand period, instead of turning on a peaker plant, which regular viewers will know is a very energy intensive process, it takes a long time to turn a peaker plant on, there's generally a lot of carbon emissions associated with it, instead of turning that peaker plant on, turning off or turning down things in the home to help the utility company basically shave the top of that peak demand.
That's exactly right. In fact, the SPAN panel and SPAN platform that we have operating today is already capable of doing some of the things you're describing, and we are partnered with a few utilities across the country demonstrating this capability as we speak. And I think it's unique again in that instead of requiring every end appliance, be it a thermostat or an air conditioning system or a water heater or an EV charger, to be its own stack, right? To be its own controllable device with a gateway, with a cloud stack, with a bunch of APIs, we're essentially providing all of that homogeneous plumbing into the panel, which again, by design, connects to all of these appliances. So no matter what type of appliance you might have, what type of thermostat you might have, what type of EV you might have, the SPAN panel is a is a natural sort of control center or control point for all of these devices. And what's also unique is we're the only panel out there that can do this not just for your loads, but also for your on-site generation, like your solar system, or your on-site battery. So when people talk about grid services, virtual power plants, demand response, all of these are just flavors of the same essential concept, where you have a very capable edge of grid device, like the panel, that can see and monitor and potentially control a multitude of things within your home and can deliver what the grid values most, which is kilowatts. They actually don't care where the kilowatts come from. They want to see where the kilowatt reduction, the magnitude of the kilowatt reduction, and that's really what we're focused on.
Now, at the moment, Span is sold in North America. Are you expanding to other countries?
We're currently mainly in the US and North America. We because of the similarities in code and compliance requirements to other countries in North America, we'll be expanding into those regions as well shortly here. There are some architectural differences between, and of course, code differences between products here in North America and in Europe and in Australia, which is another key market for solar and storage. So we intend to have future versions of the product that'll be designed, purpose-built for those geographies. But overall, I think the underlying architecture and the software is essentially scalable and portable, no matter where we are geographically.
Whenever we talk about a smart grid, whenever we talk about smart grid appliances, smart grid products, the question of cybersecurity always comes up. So can you talk to how Span is ensuring the security of customers' devices on its network?
We have a dedicated team focusing on data and data security and cybersecurity, especially given the fact that we are not just offering up information, we're also potentially enabling controls of downstream devices in your home. And I think that the first piece of what we're trying to do is ensure that we are using industry best practices for how we ingest the data, everything from encrypting the data as it leaves the device to how the data can be accessed once in the cloud. Obviously, for the customer through their app, going through certain layers of authentication. If there's approval from the customer, how the data is shared in an anonymized manner with third-party providers that could be providing value-added services to the customer. On the control side, we are starting to do, and as is required in a lot of our partnerships with utilities, especially, starting to do a lot of penetration testing to understand how secure our system really is. And that's an area that we're continuing to invest in as we grow, so that not just today when we have a few thousands of devices in the world, but when we have millions of devices in the world, and then downstream, potentially tens of millions of devices connected to our panels, that we have the same degree or a higher degree of security.
Let's finish with the meat of the matter, the dollars and dimes of getting a Span system. Now, obviously, Span did win a 2022 honorary award from CES for the home automation category at the annual CES awards that are given out at CES 2022, or whichever year CES happens to be taking place. But let's talk about the pricing for getting a Span system. How do people go about getting Span in their homes to replace their existing panel?
We should first talk about the fact that people don't wake up and say, today I want to go buy a new panel, right? It often happens because you are making an improvement to your life. You could be adding a solar system, a battery system, potentially a new electric water heater. And more and more frequently, it's because people want to be able to charge their brand new shiny electric car at home. And guess what? The electrical panel is actually a significant impediment to adoption of electric vehicles. As you likely know, 80% of EV owners charge at home, and vehicles can now charge at level 2, which is 48 amps. But most homes in the US actually do not have 48 amps of available residual capacity to then charge your car at that rate. So most homes in the US have 100 to 125 amps of incoming service, which means you're rate limited. When you start to electrify, and I think this is, like I said before, it's a bit of a journey, there might be some marginal device that you adopt that triggers a panel upgrade, but worse yet, a service upgrade, right? Which means you have to now go back to the utility and say, hey, I just don't have enough power coming into my home. I'd like my 100 amps to be 200 amps, or my 200 amps to be 400 amps. and that's prohibitively expensive. So when you think about it from a cost offset standpoint, and as you think about the path to electrifying every single home, we think there's a very clear economic use case for SPAN. What we are offering the panel at today, it's a retail price of $3,500, and the typical installation, depending on the complexity of your home, and some homes are more cleanly built on the electrical side than others are, can be from a couple of $1,000 to $2,000 to about $4,000, depending on what your wiring system looks like. But that's not atypical for even a dumb panel installation. So the installation, if you will, is the same cost whether you go with a SPAN panel or a traditional passive safety device like a dumb electrical panel. Really, the cost differential is that we're a couple of $1,000s more expensive than a traditional panel today. But we think that with the added functionality, with the ability to dynamically change your priorities, especially in the event of an outage, and then now increasingly our compatibility with a new EV charger, SPAN Drive, it more than justifies the system costs. And we're obviously working towards lower price, higher volume versions of the products in the coming years.
It has been a real pleasure to talk to you, Arch. Thank you so much for coming and talking about SPAN. I know that some people will look at this and go, why are we covering this on a channel that's focused primarily on transportation? But it's pretty obvious. Without having a way to smartly manage and integrate your energy coming into your home, generated on your roof, stored in your home, it becomes very hard to have a cleaner, greener, safer and smarter vehicle. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. And I wish SPAN all the best and happy growth through 2022.
Thank you, Nikki.
And of course, thanks to you at home for watching today. If you haven't already, please make sure that you've hit subscribe for this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolved Take 2, where there is a slightly longer version of this interview. And make sure that you hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out when our next video goes live. Thanks on behalf of the entire team go out to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons. That's Chris Maxwell, Brian Newton, Jason Bordor, Dave Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leon, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tesla in the Gong, Gordon C, Stephen O'Donoghue, Carl Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Rory Litwin, Anonymous Freak, Jim Burness, and Denny Hyde. And our deepest gratitude goes to our $100 a month Patreon supporters. They are Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Joe Bresney, JP Fagerback, Will Graylin, Matthew Drobenek, John Lyons, Christopher Lee Jones, Laura Reynolds, Paul Conway, Ellery Hennesley, and Ian. And if you're feeling left out, don't forget that you can also join Patreon by following the links below, or you can support us through Bitcoin, Ko-fi, or our cool swag store. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving.